Hey guys, this is normally where I would say something along the lines of welcome to the start of another project. But this time out it's more like welcome to the middle of another project. In my mad dash to get a bunch of Predictas ready for shipping out recently, I slipped in one of my sets. I recorded some footage while working on it, but it was mixed in with two other sets, so I think it gets a little confusing. So I thought I'd record an intro for it, give you a little bit of background. Believe it or not, I do not currently have any fully restored functioning Predictas in my collection. All the ones you've seen me work on belong to other folks. So I wanted to, before I stop working on Predictas for a while, at least get one of mine in the mix. So this is my tandem unit. I talked about it years ago when I first got it. I didn't exactly get it. I got part of it. With a little bit of detective work, it seems like somebody had sold a complete blonde tandem set on eBay, tried to ship it, the head unit was destroyed, it was returned, and they relisted and sold just the base unit. That's what I bought. It came from the Southwest, which I believe is why the chassis is in a remarkable state of preservation. In the past I've claimed that it's all original. It's actually not. As I started working on it, I realized some of the parts had been replaced. The board had been pulled, and at least one of the sockets replaced. So it's had some work done. But the plating is immaculate. There's a thin layer of dust on it. Otherwise, it's fantastic. Cabinet, likewise, is in really good shape, except maybe the bottom inch of the feet have a little bit of finish loss. But I didn't have a head unit for it, which is a pretty key thing you need for it. So I put it aside for years. A while ago, a West Coast collector, restorer, chanced into an estate of Predictas in a variety, and other vintage sets in a variety of state of repair or preservation. In that mix was a bunch of Predicta stuff. I bought a head unit from him, which he shipped to me in a box with a bunch of foam peanuts, and it was damaged. The key thing I needed, though, was the connector, the cable, the base. All that's good enough. It has an original picture tube, which is basically dead. We're going to join in my work with me trying to squeeze some life out of that dead CRT. The plastic safety cover was cracked in shipping. The housing was also cracked a bit, and it's a deep yellow-brown, I presume, from cigarette smoke exposure. So we're going to pick up with me trying to resurrect the head unit, and then we're going to dive into working on the chassis. Experimenting. So this is an original low voltage type Philco CRT, the type that it's prone to have a very short life. And yeah, this does have weak emissions, but they're not horrible, but the image is pretty bad. So I've been experimenting. I put a brightener on it. And yeah, it's plenty bright, but there's a serious lack of contrast. I have the brightness down all the way now. Now it's up all the way and down all the way. And then I realized, oh, this hasn't been recapped yet. Remember, there are several capacitors on the video amp inside the neck, so I'm curious to see how much of a difference does it make. If it's still horrible after that, I'm going to try rejuvenating this CRT. I think I already have before, some years ago, when I actually picked this unit up. Well, I finished the recap, and wow, I think I'm really beating a dead horse here at this point. That this issue where when you turn the brightness up, the video kind of inverts, that is a classic symptom of a severely worn out CRT. This is the brightness all the way down, all the way up, so it doesn't change a whole lot. What that means is our cutoff isn't working. We're not getting good grid modulation. We can't cut off the electron beam effectively. So I tried a brightener. I checked all the resistors, I put a new video amp tube in, and I've recapped it. Last thing I'll do is I'll pull out my CR70 and maybe blast it a little. I've tried auto restore, manual 1, manual 2 restore, and the emissions have just been getting worse. Headed up to about 5, now I'm down to just a little bit above 2 with emissions, and imagine a life test is just horrible. Interestingly though, cutoff, which is the how well the grid can modulate, actually I can control it quite a bit, but I think the combination of good cutoff but horrible emissions is what is making that washed out picture. So the very last thing I can do is try excuse me, the very last thing I can do is try rejuvenation, but they don't recommend it. There's a chart and it says that when you have good cutoff but bad emissions, do the restore functions. Rejuve is for when you have both bad emissions and bad cutoff, but you have absolutely nothing to lose. I have never successfully rejuvenated one of these low voltage CRT types, but you guys can watch the gun while I push the button. Try to get that in frame. And here we go, 3, 2, 1. And I didn't see anything. You're supposed to see a flash or a spark. Try it again. 3, 2, 1. Nope. And one last time. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Nope. And hey, the emissions are down to 2 now. So, fantastic. The only thing you can do is these restore functions, the manual. So the idea is you should hold down the button for as long as the needle keeps going up. But while you're doing this, it is roasting the heck out of the filament. So the caution is if you hold this down too long, you burn the filament open. And hey, notice it started dropping. Yeah, so I mean, I think what's probably happening is it's boiling emittive material off of the cathode and depositing it on the grid. What little material may be left on the cathode. Just for the heck of it, I tried blasting this with my B&K 440 as well, and it did absolutely nothing. So I'm putting this to rest. So, my friends, it is time to dig into this box. Now, I'd said at the start of this, while I was working on these sets, I was going to try to mix in some of mine. That hasn't happened so much, but at least I figure since I've got this all taken apart, time to replace this picture tube. I can't leave it sitting around like this. It's going to something very bad's going to happen, like it's going to fall over and shatter. So, in this box is a 21 FAP4. Years ago, I restored a GE television for a customer, and when I popped it open, I found a 21 FAP4 in it. It's supposed to have a 21 CEP4, and I happen to have a new old stock rebuilt 21 CEP4, so I figured, what the heck, I'll install that, give the customer a brand new picture tube, and save the FA for myself. So that's what's in here. All these years that I've been squirreling this away. Now, the officially sanctioned replacement CRT for the Philco was a 21FDP4, but the FAP4 is darn near identical. I can't even recall what the difference is. I mean, maybe a slightly different G2 voltage or something like that, but it'll work. I believe I've used one before. And it's got the nice little stubby short neck. So, now do not ask me if I have any picture tubes. The answer is no. I don't even have enough to do all of my sets. I have one other short necked CRT, and that is it. And I have also squirreled it away for years, and it's also an FAP4 new old stock RCA Silverama, which I was going to use in this set, But considering how scarce these have gotten, that might be part of my retirement fund. So it's just going to stay in the box, and I'll use this guy instead. I will double check it, though. I haven't tested it in years, but I recall it had pretty good emissions. And I think it's a rebuild as well. Sylvania. Yeah, this tube is made from new parts and materials except for the envelope, which is reused, blah, blah, blah. So this is a rebuild. But it's a Sylvania rebuild. Yeah, I can see there's a very distinct weld right there. So, test this. Pop this guy out. Swap them out. Now this is more like it. This is what a good CRT tests like. Life test, needle barely drops. So, I have no doubt this will work out just fine. However, I will have to swap pins 2 and 3. The standard is G1 is pin 2, G2 is pin 3. But on the EAP4, they're the other way around. I finished with the modification. I just had to swap these 2 wires. And I looked up the specs on the FAP4, and I think it's identical to the FDP4, it's just they swap pins 2 and 3. So the FDP4 is a drop-in replacement for the EAP4, which is non-standard, and the FAP4 is a standard pinout. And remember, you got to put the back on, because it has an AC interlock on it. Alright, here we go. And she is on. 6.3 volt filament versus 2.35, same currents, will be 3 times the wattage, so it should glow quite a bit brighter, and it does. Oh, got worried there for a second. Things looked, boy, that really powered up strangely. But yes, this is how it's supposed to look, not washed out. I finished work on the main board. New 9-pin sockets, new resistors, new capacitors, new cup plates. Almost as an afterthought, I removed the ringing coil, the horizontal ringing coil. Mainly to clean the board in that area, because this board was really had some real baked on crud on it. And also recently I've found a few of these that were open, so I wanted to check for continuity. And I wanted to put some new Captain tape around it because this masking tape is deteriorating. Well, I checked for continuity. I was about ready to wrap some new tape around it when I thought, you know, I don't know why I thought this, but I thought, hey, why don't I check that I can move the core while I have this out? So I got a alignment tool, started backing it out. Hey, seems to be fine. Well, it was going the other way, and that's about as far as it goes in, and then that doesn't seem right. I've adjusted these a few times, and it seemed like it should go a little bit further. So I looked at the other side. I noticed while I'm turning this, the back side isn't turning. I think, you know where I'm heading with this. So I backed it out from the top, took it out, and guess what? It's broken in half. Probably wouldn't have been the end of the world if I had installed this as is, because you usually don't have to adjust these too much, if at all. But I have saved a few that are open that I believe have intact cores, so I think I can replace this core with one of those. It's a pretty darn long core too. I never took one of these out all the way before. Now there is another possibility, is that it's not broken. Somebody had a real hard time getting this to be on frequency and doubled it up. So let's take another one. As I say, I've never backed one out all the way before, but that seems like an awfully long core. So let's see. There we go. I'm going to put glue on this thing, jeez. Same deal. So we have two that are this length, and then the one that's in two pieces. Boy, I'm really, really inclined. Do I want to do this? The prevailing wisdom is that the set was working at some point with these, so I should probably put these back in. However, I know this set was worked on. I did a minimal amount of work. Might have been a clever tech, and they were compensating for other parts that had drifted off by increasing the inductance of that coil. And the reason I'm hesitating is these, I think, came from 9L37 chassis. It's a 9L38. Maybe they had to tweak this a little bit. I don't have any other 9L38s anymore to compare it to. You know what? Of course, I can swap these out after the fact. It's not... I can go back and do this from the top side. Alright. So I am going to go with one of the shorter cores. Remember this moment. Remember this choice. Let's see if I come to regret this or not. Here's a look at the board before it goes in. There's that coil reinstalled with a nice new insulating tape wrapped around it with the shorter core. We'll see how that works out. Let's take one last look at the pristine metal before it gets hidden by this board. Now, one nice thing about this, the chassis, the 9L37, 9L38, the wires are a lot longer than they need to be, so we have some length to work with. Now, this has been unwrapped and rewrapped before on some of these, and from this copper wire getting twisted, untwisted, it gets work hardened and brittle. So some of them have already broken off a bit, but with that extra lead length, I can cut more insulation off and use the wire wrap tool and get some nice clean turns on them. So it's kind of a treat. Now, once I get this reinstalled, I'm going to do something that I don't normally do, which is power it up. Because I've run this chassis before I did any work to it, and it kind of worked. Not very well, fold over distorted image, but it powered up and it kind of worked. So I'm curious to see, just with this reworked board leaving everything else as is it any better? We'll see. I finished reinstalling the board, popped in some tubes, hooked up the rebuilt head unit, and I fed my test pattern generator into it. Got it powered up so we get a raster. That's good. Let's see if I can find my test pattern. Huh. Not bad. Not too shabby. Not too shabby. Not too shabby at all. Now this is still on all the original electrolytics. I think there might be a few original paper caps down in there too. Now I could pop this back in the cabinet and call it done and keep an eye on it and wait until a cap actually fails to replace them. But it's the thing about Predictas. They are a pain to work on, as I'm sure if you've seen any of my videos on them. So I always recommend, while you've got the thing out and up on the workbench, you might as well go through it all. So I'm going to flip it over. I still have the original filament dropper resistor in there too. I'm going to flip it over and finish going through it. but I doubt we'll see all that much of an improvement. It looked like the focus was off a little bit, but there is a focus jumper inside the head unit that I might want to tweak. But otherwise, this has been pretty smooth. Haven't recoated the flyback yet either. I suppose I should do that. Back underneath the chassis, I did the final replacements. The 3-section cap here, with this cap, and that cap. Replaced the 3K power resistor, added a terminal strip to accommodate a couple parts here, and replaced the filament dropper. Even though it looked okay, even though the set kind of worked, when I measured this, the 17 ohm section, 46 ohms. The 13 ohm section, 45 ohms. The 8 ohm section, 11.5. That's overall more than twice, almost 3 times the value it's supposed to be. That's in series with all the tube filaments. That should be restricting the current, which means with this out and replaced with these new guys here that are in spec, the tube should run stronger, more gain, sharper picture. Maybe, we shall see. Also finished rebuilding the IF board on the other side. So we're good to go. I'm going to flip this over, and the final thing I'm going to do is go over all the tubes, check them all again, make sure they're very strong, and let's see how the percent performs.
Oh, yes, I can.
I rechecked all the tubes and ended up finding a few that were kind of marginal and replaced those, and now it's playing really, really well. So the next step is to reinstall the chassis into the cabinet, start buttoning everything back up. Alright, the last big hurdle on this project is to put a cover over this new CRT. Well, this is the housing that came with this set. It's horribly discolored. I don't know if it's from smoking or weather exposure or what. This is after me doing several rounds of trying to clean it. I thought it was just cigarette smoke at first, but it didn't really come off. I got more aggressive and it kind of bleached and discolored the plastic. But also while doing it, I discovered there's a crack all along one side. Okay, what other options do we have? Well, this is housing that came from another set, and it's been painted and isn't in the greatest shape either. But we have a third option. I think that'll be the winner, and that is one that came from a tandem set I got years ago at an antique shop where they cut the cable off, and it's an original CRT inside, and it's no good. But the housing looks good. Yeah, it's a little bit yellowed and discolored, but not as bad as the initial one, and the screen cover looks pretty good. So I think between all these we can cobble together one halfway decent complete tandem head unit. So next task is to take this back apart, take this cover off, take that all apart, clean and polish the cover, and then swap it. And notice it has those marks because it has started to shrink. So we want to try to avoid that if we can. As these shrink, these don't just shrink around the perimeter, they start shrinking back and they start bumping into the glass CRT, and that's what that mark is. So the plastic is touching the glass. Not that visible when the set's playing, but it is annoying and distracting. And just like that, it's done. No, actually, it was about 5 hours of very tedious, annoying work to clean off all the crud from the screen cover and install it. But finally it is done. Finally, I have my blonde tandem complete and done and working. Thank you for sticking with me through this. It has been years in the making. And also thank you for sticking with me all throughout 2 seasons of Predictapalooza. And I can assure you, I have no intention of working on any Predictas in 2024. Of course, anything is subject to change, but it's not that I'm done with them. It's not that I don't like them. It's not that I don't intend to ever work on one again, but I have a lot of other projects I want to work on. So that is going to be it for now. Happy New Year. Thanks for watching.